Thank you for the introduction, Stuart. Thank you for the invitation. Really happy to be here and to speak in the context of the Biennale, particularly because Stuart and I have just come out of a really kind of profound collaboration on the ICA exhibition that Forensic Architecture just closed in London. And I guess that when we work with other practitioners, such as designers, and curators and others, they, rather than leave the task of those collaboration to simply represent the work that we've done, at best we're trying to bring them into the investigation, because for us the presentation of a case is really part of what forensics, or indeed counterforensics, is. And I will explain that. I'll explain to you through the concept that we'll discuss today, forensic aesthetics, why issues of presentation of truth claims are absolutely inherent to the practice itself. So, forensic aesthetics, it sounds like a kind of contradictory in terms, no? Because forensics is anything but aesthetics. I remember when a book that I co-authored, a book called Mengele Skal, came out, I presented it to one of the barristers in Matrix Chambers in London that we were working with. At the time, he was the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights. And I said, I have a little gift for you. And it was a book called Mengele Skal, and the subtitle was The Advent of a Forensic Aesthetics. And he goes like, forensic aesthetics? Can you explain? And I explain a short version of what I'll explain to you now in a long form. And then he says, oh, that's all fine, but you might never repeat it when I cross-interrogate you in court. This is because, obviously, the conception of truth that is required of an expert, a forensic expert, in court or in any other forum, is absolutely opposite to how we conceive aesthetics. Aesthetics is perhaps kind of playful, perhaps a license also to manipulate. This is the way it is perceived, no? And forensics is anything but. It is the object as itself. It's the kind of the idea of the unmediated truth that exist within the perception of aesthetic. However, everything that I will tell you today is an attempt to contest that claim and to show you that aesthetics is a central category in forensics, from the analysis from crime scene investigation to the work in the lab and to the presentation in the court or in any other forum that it will be presented. But in order to explain that, I need to take you through the three domains of forensic work. So forensics, to put it simply, operates within three main spaces. The first one we call the field. This is where the crime has taken place. This is the scene of the crime. This is where evidence and traces are left and need to be collected and systematized. The second space that forensics operate in is the lab. This is where you would take perhaps something from the field or from the crime scene, you would analyze it, you arrive at some conclusion. And then the third space of forensics is the court, right? Where the truth has to be performed through its own rituals. And I say rituals because that form of state forensics, right? Forensics as the art of the police, let's say, is a kind of a religion in a sense. If you think about it in these terms, when a murder takes place, the police would cordon off the area, right? That cordon, the murder sanctifies the site. What means sanctify? Like in any religious theory, that which is taken away from common use, right? So you have a zone into which you could only enter if you are a state agent, if you flash your FBI card or whatever it is, MI5, police, you can slip under this cordoned off area. In this cordoned off area, people are dressed like priests, no, in white from head to toe, and perform all sort of actions that only those people dressed in white can perform. Then in the lab, there's all sort of protocols in which the holy objects, the objects of in which the evidence for a crime is stored, need to be treated in a particular way. They need to be locked in particular drawers. Then they need to be established a chain of custody. There's a protocol of who can touch them and how is that is processed. And I don't need to tell you that the court itself is a kind of a highly ritualized form of truth claims, right? And in this country, indeed, with those wigs, etc. The counter-forensic practice, and this is what we see ourselves as, and I think this is what Stuart meant when he said that, indeed, we do not perform police work, we investigate the police. We try to invert the forensic gaze. We try to turn that the police itself, the forensic people itself, into alleged criminals, right? I mean, we're trying to look at interruption in the manipulation of evidence, their subterfuge, etc. And in this sense, we can never work like state forensic specialists can. We can never enter into this cordoned off area. Indeed, if the state commit a crime, if there's a state-sanctioned murder, as I would show you now, that area is off limit to anyone that would investigate the police crimes. In the lab, we cannot match the kind of science and the kind of resources that police department have. We need to turn the lab into a studio. We need to work with other means in order to establish our aims. Indeed, our way of entering this cordoned off area is only through leaks. If something that happened inside managed to make its way outside. And these things could be if there are people inside that recorded something on a smartphone and they can send it to us, or they can upload it online and we can find this, or indeed a leak, and we can, and as we increasingly do, analyze huge dumps of information and image. And in the court, a counter-forensic specialist can hardly enter into it because the state would often deny us the means and the access to these forums precisely because we call the state to question. So here is how we need to think about forensic aesthetics differently. And this has been really a kind of a process of 10 years of like really trying to understand, trying to teach ourselves anew what aesthetics is and how it can become operative. But I think we're having some feedback issue. Is that maybe because of this, or my phone, or what?
I would suggest holding the microphone on down so you're closest.
This microphone?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that better? Oh yeah, much better. Okay. Yeah, it was getting a bit annoying. So a kind of profound interrogation of the term aesthetics, and we started to reconstruct it, what it means to us, and perhaps a useful start is the origin of the term itself. So let's look at the very basic meaning of aesthetics, that which lends itself to perception, right? What we can perceive in the same way or in an opposite way that anesthetics is that which numbs us to perception. So aesthetics, before it has, in its pre-Kantian form, let's say, before the whole critique of judgment and all that, is simply the way that things present themselves to our senses. And we can speak about human aesthetics, how humans perceive their environment, but we can also speak, and increasingly we do, about the aesthetics and non-human aesthetics, the aesthetics of matter, the way in which matter perceives, the way in which surfaces, material surfaces, they could be skulls, or they could be buildings, or they could be the surface of this floor, or they could be the walls of a room, are continuously recording. They're like recording and perceiving devices. They're like sensors. And sensors, analog sensors, in a sense that their continuous transformation is a diagram, is a record of what's happening around it. Think about, as an architect, I'm thinking often about the first millimeters of a building facade. Think about how its transformation, its buckling, its cracking registers environmental transformation in the city in which the building is located. Think of those materials as sensors in which we could read, in fact, the environment around them. So this is the very first meaning and use that we have for the term forensic aesthetics. In the studio, or supposedly in the lab, we need to work with different kind of materials than usually what the police would work with. We work in conflict zones. We work in places where often we are denied access to. So we work with images. We work with the images that people upload. We work, therefore, if images become the most common and the most powerful evidence for war crimes now that exist, clips and images online, image practitioners, artists, filmmakers, to a certain extent architects, are those that are able to notice things in them, compose them with other things, and build meaning from them. And the forensic aesthetics in the forum means that if we are in court, it's the whole gesture and theatricity and prosopopeia in which you speak, ventriloquize matter. But it's also increasingly for us an attempt to use cultural and art institutions to make evidence public. Because if you are in the business of counter-forensics rather than forensics, your evidence is not, properly speaking, only belonging to the court. It needs to be made public, it needs to be made effective, and we need to find all sorts of other alternative fora to present it in. And these are the media, and these are cultural institutions, these are lectures like I give you today, that are important venues for the performance of evidence. Okay, enough kind of introduction on forensic aesthetics. I'd like to show you how it operates. And I'd like to take you through a number of cases that we work on recently. And when I say we, I mean a group of about 15 or 20 of us. Half of us are architects, several artists, investigative journalists, coders, lawyers, scientists. I always forget some of the disciplines that we work with. About a year ago, we came to work and we saw news from Israel, a place where I come from, that were very disturbing. A village that we worked in on land claims, we supported land claims, in a Bedouin village in the Negev, in the Israeli desert, has been attacked by the Israeli police. Hundreds of policemen entered that village in order to demolish it and remove the people from it. The state claims that these people are squatters and are illegal occupants of a zone. I don't want to enter into that debate, and maybe some of you have read my book, The Conflict Shoreline, on that. But what happened on the morning of the 18th of January 2017 was a very violent attack, and at the end of which, in the morning, we realized that 2 people were dead. One was a policeman, one of the force that came to demolish that village, and the other dead person was Yaqub Musa Abulkian, a teacher, a family man from the village, and the police claimed that the reason for the 2 dead was that Abu Kian went into his car and accelerated it towards the policeman in a terror attack, trying to run a policeman. Indeed, the policeman died from being hit by the car of Yaqub Musa Abu Kian. And there started quite a wild kind of set of accusations. This is the Israeli police Twitter account, and they recount what happened, or what they claimed happened. As security forces arrived this morning in Khiran in the Negev on a law enforcement mission, a villager charged them with his car in an attempted terror attack. Maybe you know this man here on the left is our Prime Minister, Netanyahu, and he posted on that day on his Facebook his condolences for the family of Erez Levi, the policeman that died, and he claimed that it's a terror attack, and he claimed that he's going to destroy the home of terrorists. Now, the Bedouin man and his family are terrorists, their homes are going to be destroyed, and he's going to deny them residency. They're not residents, they're Israeli citizens, and it's impossible for him to deny that, but you see like massive incitement that is happening on the top level. The head of the Israeli police actually claimed not only was he a terrorist, the Bedouin man, he belonged to Daesh or ISIS. And then the police made an error. And what they've done is release a video that they claimed was shot by a helicopter, and I know was shot by a drone. Never mind. And in which they describe the event. Again, they say, here is the document that shows that Yaqub Musa Abu Kian charged his car at the policeman, and then the policeman had to kill him in order to stop that operation. So in red, they say this is the terrorist car. Here in blue is where the policemen are standing. And here, I'll just show you the video. Sorry, okay. Now, let me go back actually. This video is a thermal imaging video. So everything that you see in black here is warmer than its surrounding. They also claim that the terrorist car drove towards the policeman with the light off. Now, this is a thermal image, light on or off would not register on it. So you see the kind of the level of manipulation that is already kind of undertaken on this. And this becomes really a major case by which the Bedouins of the Negev are going to be denied residency, and more villages are going to be destroyed because of it. So there's a huge stake in doing that. So we come in the morning and we ask the people from the village, those Bedouin residents that we know, to send us all videos that they have. And they send us hundreds of videos. And we ask the Israeli activists that support them to send us videos. And we just spend the entire morning looking and sieving through those videos. And what we are looking for is the moment of a video of the moment in which the car hit the person, the policeman. Now that happened in the dark of night. So nothing is visible, but what we are looking for is the soundtrack, because we want to put the soundtrack over the invisible, the silent police video. Finally, we find a video taken by an Israeli activist called Keren Manor. She is filming another thing at precisely the same moment. Her camera is directed in the other direction, but the sound recorder on her camera captures some very important sound piece. And here it is. Did you hear 3 shots? Okay, so now we're trying to look. What we're trying to do now is to look for those 3 shots. We hear puff, 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 in the thermal imaging of the police so that we can sync them up. Okay, what you can see now, we'll zoom into the police video, and this is the car. And actually you could see 3 flares coming out of the gun. The heat, when a gun shoots, a cloud of heat is coming out, and we can see something completely opposite to what the police has said. In fact, the police shoots the car first. It's driving slowly, very, very slowly. The policeman shot 3 bullets at the car. At this point, the car begins to accelerate, and only now it hits the policeman. So all of a sudden, the story becomes is put on its head. Although we do not know whether, or we cannot prove yet, we will be able later, that Yaqub Musa Abu al-Kiyan did not intend to kill the policeman. It could be that he was shot at and then he revenged and charged it. So this is the first step, though. So we release it in Israel on some activist blog, and this blog is being tweeted by the head of the Communist Party in Israel. The head of the Communist Party is a wonderful guy called Ayman Odeh, a Palestinian academic from Haifa, my city also. And he's also the head of the Arab party in the parliament. So the Communist Party is part of the big constellation of all Arab parties that have that compete for seats in the Israeli Knesset. And he says he basically just tweets our analysis, and he says that the police story is wrong. You can see his last moment in the analysis of active stills and forensic architecture. Now this is the reality we always face. Here's the police, like the last, troll. The Israeli police official Twitter account says, Ayman Odeh, manipulative edit will not change reality. The documentation of the killing proves an intention to murder a policeman. This has one name, terror. No clip that distorts evidence, right? So an attack on the quality of our evidence immediately there, and then. So we need to move to the next phase of the investigation. We need to show another important thing, that the acceleration of the car could have been the intention, could have occurred without the foot being pressed on the gas pedal, right? And then we do something that we do often. We do a full-scale reenactment. We go to the village. These are our friends. We take a car, which is the same car. We put it on the same slope, and we know from the leaked pathology report that Yaqub Musa Abu al-Kiyan was shot in the right knee. So our suspicion is that his foot simply moved from the brake and the gas at that moment where you saw the 3 shots. But we need to prove it. So we position here. These are 3 forensic architects from our teams. They are these 3. They're standing for these 3 policemen. He is the shooter, and at that very moment, the car would remove the foot from the brake, and we try to see if it moves in the same speed. Opa, sorry. Indeed, the car arrives at the standstill precisely at the same time that it is dead. You did not have to press. If the police claims that the trigger, that the instrument of killing was the gas pedal, we can show that the gas pedal was not pressed at all, because it would have traveled faster than the simple sort of gravity move of that car. Then we notice another thing. By syncing all those images together, and this is happening several months after, we realized that we overlooked a really important piece of evidence. There was an Al Jazeera film that we never knew in which direction the camera stood, and only while syncing it we realized that that it is showing that vehicle at the time. Do you see that vehicle here? And these are two policemen. These are those two policemen that are standing. The camera captures them as silhouette against this car. So we know it's precisely that moment. And something very important, the light on the car are on. So that took away all the police kind of claim. And the entire police narrative was demolished. And in fact, the Israeli government had to backtrack on their claim. Again, we did not enter the court. We would not enter the court. We simply, a kind of combination, and I make it much shorter. There's been many more tweets. There's been many more back and forth and publication in the meantime. But sort of an action, concentrated action in the media forced the government to retract the fact that Yaqub Musa Abu Elkian was a terrorist, that he was a member of Daesh, which had very important consequences. First, to the Communist Party, which was accused of supporting terrorism, and that there was an attempt to take away their immunity. Second, the family of the surviving family of Yaqub Musa Abu Elkian was able to access funds, etc. But we didn't want to actually leave the story there. We wanted to keep the pressure on the police because there was another thing that we have discovered while syncing the video with the soundtrack. So let's go back to Keren Manor. So Keren Manor is filming in the wrong, the lens is directed in the wrong place. She captures the sound. She hears the gunshot. She ducks behind a big rock. She waits for 14 seconds, then she has confidence again. She switches on her camera again. So we have 14 seconds of silence. We have her metadata, and we can keep on now listening to the soundtrack after those 14 seconds of silence. And what you'd hear now, you'd hear a very loud voice. You would hear the horn of the car. Yaqub's body is pressed against the horn, and but we'll hear also another thing. Now what we see, here is the car. This is the car that came to a standstill, and we see policemen closing on it from all directions. So you see that they're going closer and closer to the car. They go slowly, they are maybe still worried. Then they open the front door of the car, or the front door opens, and then we hear something else. We hear another shot. And we're asking ourselves, what is this last shot? That shot could have been fired anywhere on the field. I mean, we don't know that the shot was fired there. But Yaqub Musa Abu Elkian had a wound under his heart and was let to bleed for 20 minutes as he died on the scene. And we were suspecting police execution. So we go back now to our reenactment. So we go into the car. This car is driven now by the cousin of the deceased. It's a similar car. It's not the same one, but it's the same model. And look what happens when the car reaches 20 kilometers an hour as it goes down the slope. So now we're in the reenactment, filming from inside. So the police could not have opened the door. We know that the window was closed. The only person that could have opened the door was Yaqub Abu Elkian, who was likely complying with the police demand when he was shot. And that is the kind of the serious accusation here that we have of the police. Because the first shot, the police accepted that Abu al-Kiyan was not a terrorist, but they also did not want to prosecute any of the policemen on the site. Why? Because of the same old split-second argument that you hear everywhere when police shooting takes place. When the US police shoots a black motorist on a highway, when the motorist reaches for the glove compartment to show them some papers, and those people are being prosecuted, they said, well, you know, as a policeman, we have split-second decisions to make. Those split seconds are almost kind of instinctive moments where we would never know, or we could not know at that moment whether the person is reaching for a gun or for the paper. And therefore we are justified in our response. And often the split-second argument is a kind of a trial winner. Because juries particularly accept that policemen need to make life and death decision. The question is like that: why is the instinct of a policeman different when it comes to a black motorist, or different when it comes to a Bedouin man in Israel? And how, in fact, in the split second, in the programming of the instinct, what you see is the very long duration of slavery, of race relations, of colonization, if we're talking about Israel. And this is something that is extremely important for us, and another aspect of counterforensics. While state forensics always want to reduce the event in question to the kind of the smallest temporality possible. The two ends of a smoking gun, right, in a split second. Counterforensics want to enter an event, want to enter into a molecular level of time and move out of it into the long duration, into the political relation, into the social relations, into the kind of political change that is necessary for these crimes not to happen. Because we cannot operate like the police. We can do 2-3 cases. We do 2 or 3 homicide cases a year. We do other things. We do environmental, we do migration issues. We need to choose those where the split second of the event can be placed in the world in which it is part, right? Every event is conditioned by its context, and that context is what is important for us, rather than the linear logic of state forensics. Okay, I'm going to show you another project. Do we have time? We have time, right? I assume that's a yes. Okay. I want to show you another project, a very different project to do with architecture. We were asked by Amnesty International to interrogate the most secret and horrific prison operated by the Assad regime, the prison of Saidnaya. It's located about 40 kilometers north of Damascus. Very few survivors. All detainees are tortured, starved, many starved to death, and mass executions are also taking place there. There were very few survivors, and some of them were tracked by Amnesty International in refugee camp in Turkey and later in other places in Turkey. And they were willing to give testimony. And together we were trying to reconstruct both the building and the practices that happen inside of which. We had no evidence at all. There were no videos, there were no sound recordings. There was only the memory of 5 survivors who were there. And if you think this is difficult, the next problem we had is that those survivors entered that prison blindfolded. They haven't even seen the prison. Whenever they walked in and out of it, they had a sack or they had to press their hands against their eyes as they walk in and out. And indeed, whenever a guard opened the door to the room. So started a very interesting collaboration with also a member of our team, a great artist, I think, somebody that showed here in the last Liverpool Biennial, Lawrence Abu Hamdan. He's also a member of forensic architecture and works with us, who was, together with our architects, building a 3D model that was also an acoustic model, and the investigation was very much tuned to the sound that people heard. Doors opening and closing, footsteps, but also echo reverberation was used in order to determine the size of spaces, the height of rooms, etc., where people could not see. So this is the prison, and here are just some snippets from the interrogation. We were from the investigation. These are the survivors. They are placed in front of models. They are building architectural models. As they're building architectural models, they start recalling what is otherwise very traumatic experience for them. So, so here both sound and architectural reconstruction takes them back to a place and takes them back to the trauma. You know that in human rights work, memory is a very complicated and flippant and elusive thing. The closer one gets to the core of a testimony, to the hardest and most essential description of violence, the more the memory of those survivors play trick on them. Sometimes you have lacunas, sometimes elements simply repeat, sometimes small places appear big, and big spaces appear claustrophobically small. And one needs to know how to read those errors in memory, and how to read those lacunas, and how to weave them back into the account that we have. I'm going to show you now a small snippet of an interview where one of the witnesses, survivors, recalls the most horrific moment that he experienced in Sednaya, a horrific moment of beating, something that was not available immediately for recollection otherwise, by simply asking him to model something very technical, the hatch in his room. So he's speaking now to a Palestinian architect on our team, Hania Jamal, who is modeling as he's speaking. And she asked him a simple question: does hatch on the solitary confinement room, how big was it? And where exactly was it? And he all of a sudden recalls the dimension as being as big as his head. This is what he says. A bit longer than his face, right? And then she asked him, how do you know that? And then the next recollection comes back. So again, how memories, repressed memories, are accessed through architectural modeling, and this horrific description by which he had to push his head through the hatch and being beaten on the other side. The kind of stuff we have to deal with continuously. You saw the Israeli kind of police tweeting like a troll. But you haven't, when you publish anything against Syria or Russia, you have their kind of troll farms. So here, after we have corroborated this research with not only our 5, but with other survivors, pro-Syrian kind of web activists that kind of like coming up with a headline, Amnesty hired special effect expert to fabricate evidence. Remember, the Israelis called it manipulative evidence. Israelis sometimes call us Pallywood, like Palestinian Hollywood. Here, we had even the honor of the henchman-in-chief denying this report that you've seen. Take a look.
The report that you have mentioned, it was a report made by Qatar, financed by Qatar. You don't know the source, you don't know the names of those victims, nothing verified about that report. It was paid by Qatar directly in order to verify and smear the Syrian government and the Syrian army. There are a lot of eyewitnesses. No one knows who are they. We don't have anything clear about that. It's not verified.
So, yeah, to be called a Qatari group is quite far-fetched. We obviously we did not receive any offer for money from Qatar. I don't know what we will say if we do, but we haven't. So we're not a Qatari group. So you have that. We're entering into a situation where that kind of idea of propaganda, of fake news propaganda, is moved now from the battlefields. I mean, as an Israeli activist working in the West Bank, we know it all the time. No, I mean, the Israeli government would bomb or kill or rob, and then would deny that they've even done that. And if you would say that, you'd be accused yourself of being anti-Israeli or worse. The reality that we were living with is now current, kind of everywhere. The populist right has taken those kind of like wartime lies and made a new politics out of it. Whether it is the Hungarian government, the Polish government, the American, of course. Up to you. You would say whether Brexit was won fair and square or fake news is also part of the culture of this country. We are in a situation where we need to establish, not only fight for facts or for claims, but re-establish the meta-political ground on which claims could be made. Re-establish reality. Fight for verifiability. And I find it a bit counterintuitive coming from the humanities, coming from theory, coming from arts, that we establish a forensic institute and we provide evidence, sometimes for court and sometimes against courts, but that we insist on evidence, that we insist on the evidentiary value of aesthetic production. But I think that an organization like ours, for a kind of a creative forensic institute, could only emerge as a response to the challenge of the present, to the response to those fake news claim, and in a belief that reality is a commons, like water, like air, and if there are governments or other corporations or militias that pollute that, we don't just leave it, we just don't say it doesn't matter. People ask me, why in the era of fact do we even try to establish the facts? Yeah, because we need to re-establish verifiability. We need to establish facts as the basis, as the meta-political ground on which specific claims need to be articulated and fought for. I want to show you another, just that you don't think that we are only working on Syrian violation. Another case, we good? Another collaboration with Amnesty International, a prison in Cameroon, where Cameroonian special forces, trained by Israel, supplied by US and France, is effectively, again, executing and torturing detainees suspected of being Boko Haram fighters. and very often not. What we needed to establish is American presence close to those sites of torture. So at some point in investigation, we knew that torture is happening within those buildings here in this base called Salak in northern Cameroon, and we needed to establish American presence. Luckily, Facebook is not only a surveillance device on us, but it's also quite an effective counter-surveillance device. And sometimes American soldiers taking selfies forget to switch off the location. And therefore, you can just build a model and match precisely each image with its location, verify exactly where it is from. Now we'd verify also the equipment, the drones that they're doing, and we'll publish, we expose that. And then we go closer to the base. We're seeing everywhere that we have this photo, we know that American soldiers are present. We're moving from site to site. We're getting closer to the torture areas. We're using really architectural models as an optical device to sync up and know. Here, for example, you see an American soldier training Cameroonian special forces right against the building where torture is taking place and execution is taking place behind it. Here, a rather comical moment where Cameroonian and American special forces are playing football with night vision equipment, obviously a kind of form of training. But here, a direct and immediate proof that the US has access to sites of extreme torture, enhanced interrogation, however they want to do it. So they're back to their old tricks, although they said they're stopping it. And that exposure led not only to the removal of that soldier, but to a full American military investigation and the suspension of torture, at least there, until now. More time? More? Another one. Okay. Here we are in Gaza. Amnesty asked us to investigate one day in the Gaza war. We were collecting about 7,000 images. Those are coming from different places. Sometimes having a lot of information does not mean you have more clarity. You simply have a lot of things. And we did not know when we got them off Facebook and Instagram and whatever other social media, those clips are without metadata anymore. So we need to establish the space and time of each one of those. And the way we did it is by looking at the clouds. So the bomb clouds, each bomb cloud has a unique signature, and almost every image had bomb clouds in it. And therefore, we started giving names and catalog numbers to each one of the bomb clouds, and whenever we would see 2 or 3 bomb clouds that are the same, we would know that those images are of the same place and time. And here is an example. You see here, this is footage from an ambulance. The ambulance is driving always towards these smoke clouds. So it has it in the apex of its perspective. And here is the same clouds from a different perspective. You see that these are the same shapes. And you see also that these 2 clouds are closer on the right than on the left. So you know that they're taken from a different angle, and we can reconstruct that angle from that from that point. So here is how we do it. We're looking for those clouds within the sort of like image flotsam, this huge archive of different things. We see 2 clouds. We try to see if we can sync them up, if they're the same one. Is it the same bomb? We are identifying moments within it, verifying it, and then we can sync up those images. And then we are moving on to locating where the images are from. We identify a football stadium and a water tower. We draw a straight line, and we know that the photographer is somewhere there. And when we identify where the photographer is, we could cross-reference 3 of those, and we know exactly where the bomb has landed. and we can verify it with before and after satellite images, and we can see, yes, the area has been massively destroyed. Here we're trying to establish the time of that bomb by looking at the shadows. So we build an architectural model and we run a shadow on it until we match the shadow lines with the digital shadow lines and establish the precise time. So now we know, we sync them up, we have the time, we have the space, and we can start tell a story. Here's another thing that we do. We saw in a satellite image where we have the image, we have the time on satellite images, we see a cloud. Now we start looking for that cloud in eye level, and we find out that this bomb cloud is indeed that bomb cloud, and then we can create our Rosetta Stone, which is effectively cloud shape versus digital time. And this allows us to create a timeline and find out where each image took place. And then what we would do, we'd invert, we would not look at the sky anymore, and we'd start looking at the earth, and we'd start speaking to the survivors and verify and start composing the narrative. Here we're using the model in order to identify munitions. You would see now a bomb. You don't see it if you don't freeze it, but this bomb exists in one frame of 25 frames a second. And the lawyers ask us to ID this bomb to see which bomb it is. Here you could see how we do it. So now we freeze that, and we know where the bomb is landed, so we know how to locate the image plane within the model, and we can measure the image plane and put a grid behind it. And indeed, these two bombs killed 16 people split second after. It's 150 meters, you put the grid, and you can actually measure the bombs in mid-air with quite a good margin of error. And then you go to the catalog and you find this bomb. And then you can actually start doing all sorts of supply chain activism on this. So this is how the map looks like. This is the amount of work that is necessary. Every bomb that we sync up, that we look, that we triangulate, is one dot here, and we've done it about 170 times. And it took us a year to do it. Whatever took the military a day to destroy, whatever would take the Palestinians a decade to rebuild, took us 1 year to reconstruct some aspect of it. A year for a day is pretty much the kind of the right ratio of forensic work. So I'm going to leave you with it, with the image of our kind of working drawing of how much work goes into observing, in how observing is not simply a passive act of looking at things, but how much in order to see, you need to build models, you need to compose and synchronize and build the case as a cross-referencing of various types of evidence, of memory, of sound, of image, of matter. And these take a lot of dedication, and they take a lot of commitment by our team. And it's using their talents and passions as architects and artists and other practitioners. So thank you very much for listening.